There's been a string of suicides in my town. The victims always break their mirrors first. By Worcester Street. A half-dozen police cars crowded in the gravel driveway, their headlights lighting up a row of trees. The gnarled shadows they threw against the walls of the farmhouse swayed gently in the breeze. I pulled my hair back into a ponytail as I stepped over a line of yellow police tape. I didn't want to be accused of contaminating any evidence. A young officer eyed me suspiciously as I approached the house, but let me pass through the front door. He knew why I was there. I found Jack's corpse in the upstairs bedroom, the blood from his self-inflicted gunshot wound still wet and sticky. Detective Marston, a thin, balding man, stood in the center of the room, writing something in a notebook.
"Hello, Jane,"
he said, as I stepped through the doorway.
"I'm surprised you didn't beat me here."
I ignored the comment, squatting down near Jack's body. Most of his head was missing, and a thick iron scent hung in the air. The old man wore a pair of blue overalls now spackled with blood. A piece of paper poked out of his chest pocket. I shot a look over my shoulder at Detective Marston.
"You mind?"
I asked.
"Be my guest."
I pulled the paper out and unfolded it delicately. There were a few words written in his shaky hand. It read, "It keeps getting closer. It keeps coming closer." I took a picture of the note with my phone before handing it over to the detective for him to read. He read it over a few more times, then paused. I knew he wanted to ask me about it, even if he hated that he needed me.
"You've got to have some kind of explanation of this for me,"
he said. I did, but Marston didn't need to know what my guess was. I'd been working for 3 months on these suicides, and I'd finally managed to win his trust. I wasn't about to blow all my credibility on a guess that would have him questioning my sanity. Instead, I shot a look down the hallway.
"Maybe."
I said.
"I got a few questions first. All the mirrors in the house are broken, I assume?"
"Just like the other cases? Yeah.
Marston said.
Anything that can show a reflection is either broken or thrown out."
"Who found him?"
"I found the body myself. You guessed that he'd be the next to go. So I decided to drive out and check on him."
I swung my head at the sound of crunching gravel. A car came to a stop in front of the house. The headlights flicked off and a girl stepped out, her hands covering her mouth. She looked to be about 20 years old. I shot a questioning look at Marston.
"It's Olivia, his granddaughter,"
he said.
"She's the only one left alive in Jack's family. We caught her half an hour ago."
He stared at me, his eyes hard.
"Is she going to be next?"
I shut my eyes and rubbed my forehead.
"Yeah, probably."
Marston cursed. I handed him a business card.
"If you wrote anything else down, please let me know."
He took the card with a grunt, stuffing it into his back pocket. I left the room and made my way out of the house and down the driveway. I stopped in front of the girl and extended my hand.
"I'm sorry for your loss,"
I said.
"My name is Jane. I'm a private investigator working on this case."
Olivia's eyes hardened, and she didn't take my hand.
"I don't have anything to say to a reporter."
"I am not a reporter.
I paused, gathering my resolve.
And if you don't come with me, I think you're going to die like the rest of your family."
Her eyes widened.
I'm...
"Whatever is causing these suicides is spreading."
I said.
spreading to friends and family of the victims. First it was your aunt, then your cousin, now your grandpa. You're the last one. It might already be too late, but it's possible I can help you.
She looked from me to the farmhouse over my shoulder, suddenly looking as if she might cry.
Okay, what should I do?
Come with me.
She paused for another moment before nodding, and we walked to my car.
Olivia,
I said.
Yeah?
don't look at any mirrors on my car or otherwise.
Why?
Just don't. Trust me.
She stared at me as if I was crazy. But when she saw I was serious, she agreed. I drove towards the road, gravel crunching under my tires. The first few minutes of the drive passed in silence. Olivia took a deep breath, and she turned to look at me.
So, what's gonna happen to me?
First, I'll tell you what I know, then what I guess.
I said, running over the details in my mind.
The pattern for each victim is the same. According to their friends and family, victims start by showing erratic and paranoid behavior.
Grandpa Jack was the same,
Olivia said.
ever since he found my aunt's body.
I nodded.
Their paranoid behavior is always followed by them breaking or covering all the reflective surfaces. Suicide comes next. The next victim is usually a close friend or family member, typically in the same household. They begin to show the same paranoid symptoms. They commit suicide soon after, and the psychosis spreads again.
If that's what you know,
She said.
what do you guess?
I swallowed hard.
I don't think that this is the work of a serial killer. Each method of suicide's different, and I don't know of any drugs or poison that can cause a specific type of psychosis in a victim, ranging from teenagers to retirees.
I shook my head.
I probably should have dismissed that probably a long time ago.
If not a serial killer, then what?
I
said, trailing off as we reached my apartment. I paused to park and walk up the flight of stairs to my door, locking the deadbolt behind us for all the good it'd do.
Then what?
She asked again. I walked to my home office and pulled out a folder.
I followed up on nearly 30 deaths over the past 3 months. Some of them left suicide notes.
I pulled out the pictures I'd taken from the crime scenes. Most of the suicide notes were short, and all were disjointed and confusing. I handed them to her one at a time. I saw it reflected in Marge's eyes. Even her eyes aren't safe. I can't sleep. It'll be watching me. The fingers. The fingers. It was in my rearview mirror today, almost touching me. Olivia continued to flip through the suicide notes, her expression growing more and more disturbed. I finally pulled out my phone and showed her the note her grandfather had written. It keeps getting closer. It keeps coming closer.
Was this from my grandpa?
Olivia asked. Her voice choked.
Yes, and like I said, I think you're next.
I said. She stared at me in horror.
What do I do?
Every victim broke their mirrors, and several mentioned reflections in their suicide notes. This means it's for the best if you avoid them. I'll cover the one hanging in my bathroom. You should also give me your phone. The black screen has a reflection, and I don't want to take any chances.
She nodded numbly. I took down my bathroom mirror and set it in the corner of my living room before covering it with a blanket.
You can sleep on the couch. We'll talk more tomorrow.
It was hard to sleep that night. My mind was flooded with images of the brutal suicides I'd investigated over the past months. Olivia was a rare opportunity. I had control over a victim before psychosis set in. Maybe I could save her. Maybe. The next morning I woke up and found Olivia sitting on my couch, staring into space. Her head swiveled at me. I was afraid I'd see violence or fear in her eyes. Instead, I saw intensity.
I need to look in the mirror.
She said.
Why?
I asked.
Whatever the others saw was enough to basically break their minds. It could kill you.
I need to know. You can cover it up once I see it.
I almost rejected the idea, but my curiosity got the better of me. Would I see something in the reflection behind her? Was one exposure enough to kill her?
Okay.
I said, bringing my still-covered mirror out from the corner. I grabbed the corner and slowly lifted the blanket, watching Olivia's face for any reaction. She stared at the mirror intently until the blanket was pulled away. Then she shook her head and looked at me.
I don't see anything.
Really?
I asked, my mind racing. Maybe it had jumped to a neighbor instead. Maybe Jack had a bowling friend or something. Maybe... My phone rang, the chirp making me jump. I looked at the display. It was Detective Marston.
Detective?
I said.
You have any new information for me?
I see it.
He said, his voice trembling.
What?
I asked, my face suddenly cold.
I broke the mirror so I wouldn't see it anymore, but it's still reflected in the shards. Jane, please help me. You said you had a guess. Why didn't you tell me about this? Oh God, I thought about it again. If I look in the bathroom, I'll see it. Oh God, even my phone.
His voice cut off with the sound of the phone hitting the floor.
Marston?
I shouted.
Marston, I'm coming.
I hung up and turned to Olivia.
I was wrong.
I said.
It wasn't you. It was a detective. There might still be time.
I ran down to my car, surprised that Olivia was running down the steps behind me. We sped across town, Olivia dialing the police while I snaked down several windy country roads. I reached Marston's house, told Olivia to stay in the car, and ran up the steps to his front door. It was unlocked. Marston lay inside the bath. Blood spattered the white tiles. A piece of shattered mirror hung limply in one hand. He'd taken it to his own neck. I looked away, doing my best to choke down the vomit that rose in my throat. Then he gasped, his eyes flicking open.
I didn't even know him,
he said, his voice rasping and gurgling.
I just found the body. That was all.
He trailed off, blood choking off his words. His head slumped forward, a few drops flicking off his nose. I leaned against the wall of the bathroom, trying to control my breathing. It was the most gruesome thing I'd ever seen. Then, I slowly looked to my left. His medicine cabinet still hung on the wall. Its mirror had been shattered in the center, long cracks surrounding a central point. I saw myself reflected 24 times in the individual shards. I thought back through all the cases, all the victims, family members, friends, neighbors. They weren't just close to the victims. Each of them had found the victims' bodies. I looked at Marston's now lifeless body, then looked back at the mirror. The mirror swung, changing my view from myself to a view of the kitchen. A figure stood there, reflected 24 times in the shards. It was impossible to get a good view due to the damage, but it was a creature with eyes sunken deep in its skull. Its hands had long, gnarled fingers. It was staring at me. I thought Martin's body was the worst thing I'd ever seen, but this was far, far worse. I slammed my palms over my eyes, the broken image of the creature burning into my brain like a hot iron. I vomited onto the tiles before running for the front door with my hands still clamped firmly onto my face. My foot hit the top step and twisted, and I fell down the rest of them in a tangled heap. Blood oozed from scrapes on my elbows, knees, and forehead, but I didn't remove my hands from my eyes. I lay in the grass, the warm sun on my face, and I wished for nothing more than the will to claw my own eyes out. That thing was following me. I had no doubt. I had no doubt it was getting closer to me. The thought of seeing it again forced me to my side, where I vomited again.
Jane?
Olivia said, scrambling to my side.
Jane, what happened?
You're not next, Olivia.
I said, my voice little more than a whisper.
I'm next.
That was a terribly fun tale. Although I've been staring in this mirror for the last hour, and besides mild blindness, I've come to no harm. How disappointing. I was hoping to hire an assistant. Today I was joined by 3 amazing horror narrators. 242 reads, who aside from horror also reads revenge, malicious compliance, and legal advice stories. She even writes some of her own horror stories. PA Nightmares, who is also a talented author and a narrator. And Miss Creepy Tales, who reads true scary stories and creepypasta. I highly recommend you check out all their channels in the description below. Let me know how we all did in the comments down below, and leave a like if the video pleased you. Also ring the bell if you can't keep up with me. I do also upload my stories to the silverThreads podcast, if you prefer these stories in the audio format. If there's a story that you feel I must read, then send it to storiesforsilverthreads@gmail.com. I'll thank you all for listening, and I'll see you next time with another story.